Hey everybody, welcome to my top 20 most anticipated games for Gen Con 2019. If you're listening to this on the Drive-Thru FM podcast, don't adjust your dial. I'm actually recording this as a video, but then it's just going to export the audio for the podcast, so no worries, you don't have to watch it on YouTube if you don't want. I have had some folks say, I kind of miss the board game blog thing because I like kind of seeing you talk, so which kind of makes sense because I think I can be a little bit more expressive on video than just audio. But we're going to drop it out on the audio and the video for this, and I haven't done an audio podcast this month. So as I was going through the games on the Board Game Geek list for Gen Con, I've just been kind of clicking, the ones that I want to check out, and I ended up exactly with 20. This is about a week prior to Gen Con was when I'm recording this, and then I somehow magically had exactly 10 games that are going to be for sale and 10 games that are just going to be for demo. So I'm going to kind of break this list up into two top 10s, and they're just in alphabetical order. There's no order to the one I'm most anticipating because I really don't know much about the games. So I know more about some and less about others and so on. Before we jump into the first, I'm going to do the top 10 of the games that are going to be for demo, and then I'll do the top 10 of those that are actually be there and be for sale. Just a little bit of housekeeping for my podcast folks. If you don't want to listen to this, you can click the timestamp below and jump right to either of the top 10 lists. But if you haven't had a chance to watch any of my recent video reviews, I reviewed Jaws, loved that. I reviewed Slide Quest, loved that as well, and I also reviewed Undaunted Normandy, a World War II deck building game. Also really enjoyed that game. Also did a video of the new contrast paints from Games Workshop. A lot of folks seem to really like that video, so take a look at those if you haven't taken a look at those yet. And I just wanted to give you kind of a preview, quick, just like 2 minutes, kind of coming attractions after Gen Con. Of course, I'll be covering some stuff at Gen Con, a little bit of teaser in the intro to this video. I'm going to do some kind of coverage at Gen Con. I'm not sure exactly what exactly. I'm trying to experiment. I don't want to talk about too much about it. There may be nothing, but we're going to see. I'm trying something a little different. I haven't done full-blown coverage in a few years there, but I think I kind of figured out a way, thanks to the Kickstarter folks for helping me out. I kind of stumbled along a new way to do coverage that is probably a little easier. It may actually be better quality too. So we'll see how that goes. But after Gen Con, I'm going to be covering some of those games, obviously, that come out of Gen Con, as well as some other things. So the first two things I want to mention, first of all, is, three things. First of all, I'm getting a copy of PAX Premier 2nd Edition. I've had a chance to already play that a couple of times, and I really enjoy it. And so I hit up the publisher for a copy for myself. A friend of mine has it. He lives a couple towns over, and had a chance to play it a few times with him, and some other folks really like it. I want to try the solo variant, just to kind of give that a whirl, because I listened to an interview with the solo designer of the solo game, and that sounded really cool. So you're definitely going to see some kind of video for that one. I've really enjoyed that. One of my favorite games so far this year. And the other thing I want to talk about is I've got a couple of games I've been playing around with for the last couple of months, really, and hadn't really gotten myself into a good mental space with it. And they're kind of similar. So let's just show you what they are. So first one here is Fallout Wasteland Warfare. That's the first one, okay? It's a miniature game, among other things. And the other one is also a miniature game. And this is Joan of Arc, Time of Legends. Joan of Arc is the full name of that. And so I'm going to do some coverage of this stuff as well after Gen Con. Both of these games also have a role-playing game supplement that goes with them that are more or less integrated. I'm actually waiting for my PDF of the Time of Legends Joan of Arc. I don't have it for some reason, but I'm trying to track down a copy of that. I do have the role-playing game for Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and had a chance to read through that book. And so these are very interesting games and where they kind of sit. Are they a board game? Are they a miniature game? Are they a role-playing game? And how can you kind of interchange with all that kind of stuff? Really fascinated by these games here. So the two things, the PAX Premier 2nd Edition and then Fallout and Joan of Arc, are going to get definitely some coverage after Gen Con. I need to spend a little bit more time with them. I've spent a lot of time playing a couple of games of Joan of Arc, a couple of games of Fallout Wasteland Warfare so far, and they are sort of a mess in a lot of ways, and they're sort of really cool and unique in a lot of other ways. So I'm really interested to try to figure out how to kind of cover these two games. The other game I'm going to be talking about, of course, is the new Warcry from Games Workshop, and I just got this yesterday, so I got to put stuff together. But I read through the rules. I like what I'm seeing there. So anyway, that's kind of a teaser, preview, coming attractions kind of thing. So now we're going to talk about my top 10 most anticipated games from Gen Con 2019 that are going to be just there for demo. And the first one is really a series of games, and these are called adventure games, and this one is called The Dungeon specifically. There's a couple other variants of this coming out. This is from Cosmos, and these are purportedly a lot like their Exit games, which are basically escape room games, but they're not so much geared towards puzzle solving and mechanics, but more towards the story. So think of like a Time Stories or something like that. So I'm always very intrigued by any kind of escape room style game. I wanted to like Time Stories. I didn't care for it that much, but anything in this kind of boxed experience, this narrative experience, you can kind of get in and get out within about an hour, and discovery and all that kind of stuff happens. So I like the escape room stuff, but I'm curious to see how they can kind of do that similar aspect of discovery with leaning more harder on the narrative side of things. So that's the first one I'm really anticipated to take a look at there. And the second game, again, these are in alphabetical order, is called Alter Quest. Now this is coming from Blacklist Games. This is designed by the Sadler brothers, who did like Warhammer Quest adventure card game and a bunch of other cool games for Fantasy Flight, as well as some other games on their own now. And this one's got a lot going for it. So it's dungeon crawl, which is already like a strike against it really at this point. But it does some unique and also some kind of throwback things. So instead of having modular tiles, it's got one single board that can be built in sort of a modular way. So if you think of the old Hero Quest game, it's got little passages and rooms and stuff just all over this main board, but you can kind of block off corridors and stuff. So the map itself is not going to be a bunch of digging through tiles and trying to figure out, which one goes where and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a quick setup in that regard. And then it's also going to have, I can't remember what that is, it's like some kind of deck system. It's not a deck building thing, but each character and villain and stuff have these different decks, and the different scenarios have decks that you can kind of combine. And that's going to sort of drive the game and the variability in the game, as well as make setup really easy. Now, that all sounds sort of like marketing speak, but the thing that sort of hooked me in on this one is that it's using that same system from Brook City and some other fighting game. And it sounds like it's going to have some of that sort of multi-use card idea, which is going to suck me into a game pretty regularly. So I like the kind of the aesthetic of it, the HeroScape board aesthetic. And, because I've got enough games with, modular tiles and stuff, and that's great. But it's cool to see them kind of go back and revisit that and see kind of the good parts of that Hero Quest board format versus the modular tile, which, it's kind of been already sort of assumed that the modular tile is a better approach, just kind of taken for granted, but maybe it necessarily isn't. And I like some of the things they've had to say about that. And again, I'm looking forward to that multi-use card, dynamic deck system that they've got. So the third game that is only going to be there for demos is actually quite a bit of a grail game for me. It's been a while since I've seen one of these crop up, and that's Catan Starfarers. Now this is the sort of a remake of Starfarers of Catan, which is basically, to be glib about it, Catan in space. But this carries with it a lot of the mechanics or similarities to the mechanics in Catan Cities and Knights, which by far is my 1000% favorite way to play Cities and Knights. Back in the late 90s or whatever it was, early 2000s, I had a couple of groups of friends of mine, and we played a lot of Catan, obviously. And then I didn't really like Catan. Like, that was not my gateway game. I played Catan before I played some other games, and I was like, oh, this is neat, I guess. Like, it just didn't bite me. But then after I played some other games, then we started playing Catan Cities and Knights with the Seafarers expansion, and man, that was rad to me, because it was almost like you're playing a civilization game. You could like upgrade these different tech trees with the different buildings, and you use the different resources to do different upgrades and stuff like that, not just build roads and buildings and things like that. But you still have that simple core of rolling dice for resources and trading and all that kind of fun stuff with Catan. Now the Starfarers is basically that sort of system. I'm kind of ballparking it here because I've never actually played Starfarers, but just from what I've seen, it's basically that, but in space. So without the upgrade trees, and like, I think you can like befriend alien races or something and all that stuff. So it's that sort of more complex, longer-winded Catan that I really like, but in space, and I'm like super all into this. Now, yeah, so it's Catan, but I had my top 50 games of all time list a long time ago, a few months ago, and I always kind of forget about Cities and Knights because I really loved that game we're talking, it's 2019, so we're talking like 15 years ago. But I never play anymore. I don't have Catan or anything, and nobody I know in my current groups has Catan. They all hate Catan. But I am so into, looking forward to Starfarers of Catan, or Catan Starfarers in this case. It's really, it's a longer game than Catan, and you don't want to play with more than like 3-4 players. I don't think you want to play with like the 5 and 6 player expansions. But I don't know. I really like the Cities of Night system, and if it's in space, that just makes it cooler. So the next game on the list of demo games that are going to be available at Gen Con is a game from Games Workshop called Combat Arena. Now, Combat Arena sounds like it's a lot like Gore Chosen, which was an old Age of Sigmar themed game, which was its arena combat with these, bloodthirsty warriors. But now it's set in the 40K universe, and it's going to deal a little bit more with the ranged combat. So there's nothing super hyper strategic or anything about Gore Chosen. It's just kind of a silly fight and die game. But I really enjoy it. It's got some interesting kind of card choices. Like it's not dumb decisions. Like, you're making decisions and choices with the cards and things that you play, and playing around with the initiative, and then rolling tons of dice to see who wins. This is a similar idea, but it's set in 40K. So I was able to play Gore Chosen a lot of times. I still got the game here, and it's just super fun kind of, I want to say beer and pretzels game, but I hate that phrase, so I'm not going to say that, but that's what it is. And so this is a similar idea, but it's also those models that you're going to get for Combat Arena. This is this little secret of me, is they're going to be compatible with Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress. So there's like the main reason I want it. But I still really do like Gore Chosen, and I think I'll have a good time playing Combat Arena at least a handful of times, and then just throw those models in the box with Blackstone Fortress. So that is the next game there, Combat Arena. And then the next game that's just for demo is Metal Gear Solid, the board game. And normally I wouldn't be super excited about it because I'm not like a Metal Gear Solid fan. I've played the game, it was fine, I don't know. Not my style of video game. And but the designer is Emerson Matsuuchi, and he designed Spectre Ops for Plaid Hat Games, which is sort of a hidden movement deduction game like Fury of Dracula or Scotland Yard. And I really enjoyed that back when that came out as well. But this is actually cooperative, and it's got an AI, so players are going to be having to deal with kind of a sort of a hidden movement idea there against the AI. And it's kind of fuzzy how it works. I do like the kind of the theme of Metal Gear Solid, like a special Black Ops operative trying to go in and do some different missions and trying not to get caught and all that kind of stuff. And so that kind of theme and atmosphere is going to be really neat. And because basically really on the strength of the designer, it looks like it's got in this case some modular boards to kind of add some variability in levels. And I'm curious how an AI would kind of work and how this is actually cooperative style game. So I'm really intrigued by the Metal Gear Solid board game. The next game is actually a very, very old game that's being brought back and sort of refreshed by Restoration Games, and this is Return to Dark Tower. Super interested in this one. Now, I wasn't really that keen on it. I never actually had Dark Tower when I was a kid. I know a neighbor, something had it, and I played it, and I remember it being kind of cool, I think. I remember sitting at it and, hitting the buttons and the stuff would talk and you'd move around. Don't really have a strong sense of enjoying it that much. But from the kind of the rumblings and stuff that I've heard, is this is going to kind of have an app and stuff. I think you put the phone into the tower or something and hook it up. But it's going to have like movable parts in the tower. So they're really kind of going after making this tower smart and interesting, and the physicality of the tower is going to be dynamic and all that kind of stuff. So it sounds like they're spending a lot of time here trying to make a good game out of this that's a modern game, and just keep the whole flair of that interesting tower dungeon crawl sort of thing going on. And so I'm really just curious to see where it's at in development and how it's going, and it's just intriguing. It's the physical space of the tower that it takes up, and the presence of it is going to be really interesting to see how they kind of deal with that. So that's Return to Dark Tower. The next game that's going to be just for demo is a game from CGE, and this is a game called Sanctum. Now, a couple of years ago, CGE put out a game that was basically like Quake or Doom, the board game that I really enjoyed. So you ran around and you shot your opponents and they respawned at the spawn thing, and you collected items, just like playing Doom or Quake or something. And it was like the board game form of that kind of first-person shooter, and it really worked. Like, it was really fun and quick and strategic and all that kind of fun stuff, and it felt balanced and all that good stuff. Now, Sanctum is basically going to be like Diablo, the board game, where you run through, and it's a loot and scoot dungeon crawl. It's not leaning into the RPG side or anything like that. It's leaning very much into, like, they're trying to make Diablo a board game. And so that intrigues me, because I had a good time with that other game, which I can't remember the name of, which kind of shows you how much I remember it. But I remember enjoying it. I played a handful of times and really liked it. Somebody will comment and say what the name of the game was. But this game is more interesting to me because I'm more into playing Diablo than Quake right now in my life. And so I'm just really curious how they're going to kind of pull this off and build in the video gaminess of it. Because that was the cool thing about that other game, was it really felt like it leaned on and was sitting on top of a video game. It wasn't trying to represent the same thing the video game was doing. It was trying to represent the actual video game and translate video game mechanics, like respawning and spawning items and all that stuff, into the board game. So I thought that was a really kind of interesting approach to it. And so it'll be interesting to see how Sanctum does that as well, translating video game mechanics into board game, not just taking the IP of the video game and then making it like another auxiliary item, but really taking that kind of one-to-one translation. That's kind of an interesting thing. So the next game, that was Sanctum. The next game is another Games Workshop game. This one is called Storm Vault, and this is going to be a cooperative game set in the Age of Sigmar universe. Now, this is going to sit on top of mechanics of a game that I did not enjoy from Game Workshop whatsoever. It came out last year, the year before. They had made this kind of family-driven Lord of the Rings board game, where you had like roll and move and all this nonsense, and it was like the Fellowship of the Ring was trying to compete to get the ring instead of cooperate to get the ring, and they were throwing each other into the Mount Doom and all this stuff. Like, it was kind of, I hated that game. That was no good. But this is taking some of those mechanics and then making it actually a cooperative game, which, okay, that's different. Because actually, when I played that game, I was like, this would be kind of interesting actually if it was a cooperative game. It was a simplistic family game. But I was like, why do they do this to the theme? So this one is going to be sort of the similar, basic, quick, easy playing family mechanics, but a cooperative game. It's set in Age of Sigmar universe, which I really enjoy. Obviously, my #1 game of all time. So I'm interested to check this out and see, is there actually some meat here? Did they kind of revisit this design and kind of flesh it out a little bit more? So that's Storm Vault. Just going to be for demo. The next one for demo is from Calliope Games, and this is a new addition in the Suro lineup called Suro Phoenix Rising. I'm a big fan of Suro. It comes out a fair bit at my game group, or at least it had. We were playing it, they were pretty solid for like a couple of years, and it was a good kind of quick filler game that we would play, waiting for other people to finish or whatever, wrap up the game night, we'd play some Suro. Now, I really like the one that was like Suro of the Seas with the dragons and stuff like that, because it's a little bit more chaotic, and why not? We're playing Suro. I'm not trying to be strategic here with these tiles that I have. Like, you're just gonna get screwed. So let's add some dragons in and sink stuff. So I really like Suro of the Seas. Now this has some interesting things where it looks like they got some phoenixes that are around, and I don't know exactly, but they're gonna mess with the tile placement a little bit. But there's also a mechanic here to like flip around and twist tiles after they've been placed. So that kind of, that bought me into it a little bit. So a couple more mechanics there to make it a little bit more interesting, or maybe a little bit more dynamic, maybe strategic. But I'm not really expecting high strategy from this. I'm expecting a fun filler for messing with people and talking smack as you get eliminated, which is why we enjoy Suro. So that's what I'm looking forward to, Suro Phoenix Rising. Just gonna be for demo. I bet it's probably an Essen release. And the next game is I think this is the last Games Workshop game on here, Warhammer Underworld's Dreadfane. This is just a Warhammer Underworld's game. It's a more of a starter set one. I'm just interested because I got everything for that, and I'd love to just add more stuff to it. This is a little bit more of a solo release. I think it's going to be compatible with the rest of Underworlds. I'm not sure about that. That doesn't matter to me if it is or isn't. But it'd be nice to have like a self-contained box that I can take and play with folks that haven't brought out Underworlds that much really at all recently because it's just overwhelming amounts of cards and trying to build decks for other people. I don't really play Underworlds at the shop. But when I play it with some of my friends, at this point I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to make these two decks balanced against each other and how this warband works and this other one works. So it's just like kind of overwhelming to play in a casual sense. Dreadfane would be nice to just have like a self-contained box and just say, hey, do you guys want to play Underworlds? And maybe somebody does. And then, we can just whip out a quick game of it without, too much overhead in terms of strategic, explanations and all that kind of stuff. So that's Warhammer Underworlds Dreadfane. So that is the last of the demos. So now we're going to move into the top 10 games that are actually going to be for sale. So we're back, and we're going to talk about the top 10 games that are actually going to be for sale at Gen Con, at least according to the Board Game Geek list. So the first one, again, these are alphabetical order, no particular order, because I don't know what the heck, they're anticipating. So I'm anticipating all of them. So the first one is a little bit of a risk for me. This is called Black Angel. It's from Pearl Games, and they did a couple games that I've enjoyed. This is a little bit more based on one I didn't enjoy, and that's Troyes. This is sort of like Troyes in space, or Troyes 2.0 in space. I've enjoyed other games that they've made for sure. Troyes did not hit with me, so I expect this one may not. But like I said, Troyes is one of those games like I played it. I'm like, I don't understand why I don't like this. So I want to try this. Maybe the theme will pull me in a little bit more, and I'll be able to forget some of the things that sort of irked me about Troyes or something. So I'm really looking forward to playing Black Angel. Because just on the strength of the designers, they've done a lot of games that I really do like. And so yeah, that's it. So it's basically Troyes in space. I want to kind of give that engine another crack because a lot of people really like it. I know a lot of people rank it highly in terms of the games that they've played over their lifetime. But I really want to give this one a shot. So that's Black Angel. The next one is actually a Matt Leacock game, not a Pandemic game, and this is called Era Medieval Age. And this has been sort of described to me as a roll and write game, but without the writing. So there's some dice rolling and stuff like that, similar to like, Roll Through the Ages maybe, but then you're actually constructing your little, towns or whatever with these giant blocks and things like that. So there's a little bit of, Tetris polyomino kind of spatial stuff going on. It looks really interesting, visually and stuff on the board. Although I did see a picture of a board that made it look super ugly. The board was like really yellow or something, so I hope they didn't do that. That was a prototype. There was some question about that. I was talking to some people about that, and they were like, well, no, I think this is the final board. And I'm like, ooh, that kind of knocks it off my anticipated list. But if it looks like some other earlier prototype things, I was like, well, it actually looks kind of gorgeous, laid out on the table. So it's kind of like a roll and write, which, bores me to tears. But, it's got some spatial elements and things like that, not just checking things off a checklist, then I'll be interested in it. So that's Era Medieval Age. The next game that's actually going to be for sale is the expansion to Everdell, which is one of my top games from last year. The expansion is called Pearlbrook, and I'm looking forward to this because I think it's going to add some interesting elements and some dynamics and kind of refresh the game for me and hopefully my group in terms of playing Everdell. I really enjoyed Everdell. I've had a chance to play with the family and the game group. The game group kind of was a little softer on it than I was, but it's a pretty easygoing, multi-use card game with the tableau building and all that kind of fun stuff. Really cool components and everything, and just a really solid game all around. And so I'd like to see what Pearlbrook does to kind of add a little bit more complexity to it, a little bit more dynamics, different ways to score, some different strategies and approaches and that kind of stuff. And it looks really gorgeous too, along with the base game. So I'm pretty interested to take a look at Everdell, the Pearlbrook expansion, and that is going to be for sale. The next game actually just arrived at my house yesterday, but I probably won't have a chance to play it. Maybe the day before Gen Con I'll actually get to it. So I'm still going to count it because I haven't actually played it at the time of this video. This is another game from Cosmos. This one is called Imhotep the Duel. And this one looks really cool. Like, I really enjoyed Imhotep a couple years ago with the lunch group at work, and we played the bejesus out of it, and really had a good time with it. And so just looking at, I watched a video on this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, I really like that game. They made a duel game out of it. And looking at the kind of the mechanics and how it flowed, I was like, yeah, this looks fun. This would be a really cool kind of duel game. You know, you've had like Seven Wonders Duel and the Agricola and the Caverna 2-player games. And so this looks like it would be a good, you know, kind of fit into that sort of ballpark of this kind of game, and some real good, crunchy, interesting decisions. There's another game that came out a couple years ago called Targi, I think it was called, that I had a chance to play several times. I kind of like that one. It's a good game. I just didn't really like it, kind of thing. So this looks like it's right in that kind of ballpark too, if you're familiar with that, or like a patchwork, but you know, a little bit more going on than like a patchwork. So small box 2-player duel game, Imhotep the Duel. It looks really, really solid, good, crunchy, quick, you know, half-hour 2-player game. I can always use those in my life. The next game, really excited about this one. A little nervous about this one. It's from Portal Games. It's called Empires of the North, which is going to basically be this drives me, no, it doesn't really drive me crazy. I'm going to pretend it does for the sake of the designer. Because Ignacy Trzewiczek of Portal Games, he designed like 51st State years ago. Loved it. Fantastic game. And then he kind of came out with a new edition of it. It wasn't called 51st State. It was like, this is better. This is going to fix the problems with 51st State. I was like, okay, good. It was like Winterfall or something. I can't remember. And then he's like, no. And then a couple years later, he came out with another game. And then he came out with Imperial Settlers, which I really liked. Imperial Settlers is, I prefer that over 51st State. So he came out with that, it's like civilization theme and stuff like that. Although you'd think I would enjoy the Mad Max style theme, because that is normally a theme I like. But I really liked how you could build your own civilization decks and all that stuff. And I've liked all the expansions. I don't think I have the latest one, the Aztec or something. Atlantis? I don't know. Whatever the latest one, I didn't pick it up, but I need to get that one. But maybe I won't, because if Empires of the North replaces Imperial Settlers, I'd be a little bit bummed, because I'm going to be like, well, I'd rather play that. But the things that I've seen that change in Empires of the North are like, yeah, I think I would like this better if it's, you know, obviously as polished in the design and everything as Imperial Settlers is. Because the only problem with Imperial Settlers is similar to what I just mentioned with Warhammer Underworlds is, when I take it to the game night, I'm like, okay, well, I built these decks for everybody. And then, oh, Billy, I built that Japan deck really good, and it destroyed all of us. You know, and then Frankie had the Rome deck and was like, my deck was terrible. So that's a fun part of the game, but it's also to try to play in sort of a, you know, quote unquote casual sense makes it tricky, because, you know, the play experience, you can tweak the decks and stuff, and if everybody's okay with it and not like has a stick, you know, about it, then, you know, it's okay. But if this, you can kind of get away with that with some drafting and some universal cards, and still kind of evoke a little bit of the civilization building and stuff like that. So if you can pull that off, then, you know, I'll be pretty excited about it. So I'm interested about it, because it's a kind of the next evolution of Ignacy's take on Race for the Galaxy, basically, is what this is doing. So I'm definitely interested to try Empires of the North. And then the next game here is from Z-Man Games. It is a Pandemic game, but not a Matt Leacock game. We had a Matt Leacock game that was not a Pandemic game. Now we have a Pandemic game that's not a Matt Leacock game. This is Pandemic Rapid Response, but from another pretty, you know, up-and-coming, let's call him, designer, Kane Klenko, who's done a handful of games that I've really enjoyed. Very smart, elegant, little efficient design, sometimes dexterity, and just he works in kind of a different space, and this is why the game is on this list. This is actually a real-time game. So you're kind of moving around and sort of trying to tamp out the diseases, but in a different way, but you're kind of like flying around in a ship and stuff like that, or like a jet kind of thing. So you're kind of playing like a Pandemic idea, but it's not like Pandemic at all. Again, it's real time and everything. And Kane has done some interesting stuff in that space. And he's always kind of like, he's just working in a different area than a lot of designers. Like you might take a designer, you know, I'm just pulling this out of the air, but it's like, let's find the next iteration of worker placement or the next sort of variation of miniature dungeon crawl or whatever. So he's just going out like, well, what is a weird thing I can throw together and then do real time and, you know, just work in a very different space. So Pandemic Rapid Response has some interesting things going on from what I've seen in the rules and everything. So I'm pretty interested to try that game. The next one is Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. Now, not a Power Rangers fan. I was an adult when they were out, and so I don't really know anything about Power Rangers, frankly. But from some of the stuff that I've seen in terms of the mechanics and things of what's going on here and kind of the approach they took to this, I'm very interested to see how this works, more from actually like a mechanical way than for anything Power Rangers. It's interesting. So they took this IP and they kind of built like this pseudo cooperative / dungeon crawl. So it's not a dungeon crawl, but it has sort of some trappings of that a little bit, because you're gonna like fight a boss at the end of each scenario, but it's more of a dungeon crawl or a co-op kind of thing. Think of like the Thanos game that came out last year, where you're kind of moving people around in a little bit more of an abstract space than a real physical space. And then you've got to deal with some kind of Power Ranger boss. And so I've heard from some folks that have tried this, and there's some good rumblings about how the game actually works. So, and it looks the production's great, and Renegade usually does a good job on the production and everything. So I kind of expect this to be an interesting game. The Power Ranger thing is really something that might turn me off. I'm ambivalent about Power Rangers. I don't know. I know there's a lot of people that grew up in the 90s as a kid and really like Power Rangers still, so that's interesting. But I'm just kind of interested. Just one's a curiosity about this one, just because of the approach and the design approach and all that stuff that they're really trying to take. So that's Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. And then we've got another one from Spin Master, and I think Spin Master were the folks that were responsible for that Thanos game I just mentioned. But this one's called Sinister Six. And so what this is actually the Spider-Man villains, Dr. Octopus, Electro, Venom, the Hobgoblin, and all that stuff. And so you are taking the role of the villains and playing against Spider-Man. And so that right away is basically the reason it's on the list. I know they've got some good pedigree with taking some of these licenses and making at least a decent game out of it. And so this is a really interesting approach to me, to have, taking on the role of villain, trying not to get caught by Spider-Man, who is the antagonist in this case. So that's the main thing. It's got some good kind of pedigree and some good kind of buzz around this design house, and then an interesting kind of twist on the Spider-Man theme of fighting against Spider-Man, trying to do crimes and stuff like that. So that's Sinister Six. That's got me interested. It's got a real interesting art style, look and feel as well, which I like. So that's Sinister Six there. And then we've got another one here from Capstone Games and designer Matthias Kramer. And I've liked games from Capstone Games. I've liked games from Matthias Kramer. And this one's called Watergate. And frankly, if I had a kind of a number one most anticipated game of Gen Con, it would be Watergate. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've watched sort of a playthrough, a rules overview of it, I should say. And a lot of people say, well, it's like Twilight Struggle in 30 minutes. And when I watch the rules, and I'm like, no, doesn't feel like it. And I think they want to say that because it's sort of a political thing, and it's sort of a Cold War era thing, and it's also like got some card play, and it's got some kind of tug of war going on the board. But to me, this is enough of a departure from that style. It's like you've got like 13 Days, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and some other games. Those feel like Twilight Struggle, in 30 minutes. This feels like, okay, it's a card-driven game in 30 minutes, but I don't feel anything like Twilight Struggle, but that's what has me interested in it. Because it has this interesting idea of the president, the person in power, and then a journalist on the other side of it. And the journalist is building like routes to sort of, their end goal. They're trying to uncover the wrongdoing and expose the corruption of the person in power. And so they're building leads and stuff in a somewhat abstract way on this board through some kind of like route building and stuff like that. But there's some real interesting dynamics going on here, I think, with the mechanics of this game. Just from purely, so take all the Watergate and the political stuff out of it, which makes it way more interesting because it just got that kind of charged, clandestine type of theme. But just the mechanics of that, of sort of abstracting the uncovering of information and stuff that you want to keep hidden from the public. So that sort of concept in an abstract way also makes it more interesting to me. So I'm really excited about this game, Watergate, and the Watergate thing as a whole fascinating period of time as well, and just how that sort of unraveled over time as well. So it's got kind of both angles kind of working for me, but also I think just the mechanics seem really interesting as well. So that's Watergate from Capstone. And then the last game in my 10 anticipated games that will be for sale, as well as my overall 20 games that I am anticipating, is, first I have to confess, I have a dirty secret. I really enjoy Zombicide Green Horde. I don't really talk about that game. I think I mentioned it in a podcast. I picked it up a couple years ago, painted the minis. I really wanted to get the minis for Warhammer, for Age of Sigmar, because the zombie minis in Age of Sigmar drive me a little crazy, because they're only human. I'm going to do a tangent here, I'll come back to it. They're only human. And so Green Horde had zombies that were like orcs. And I'm like, why can't, other races be zombies too? So I got it for that reason. And I'd also had heard that the medieval Zombicide, the Black Plague and the Green Horde especially, were really a lot better than the original Zombicide. I had the original Zombicide, shortly after it had come out originally, and played it, and I was into The Walking Dead at the time. I was like, I really wanted to like it, and I did not like the original Zombicide. It was just, the scenarios were out of balance, and it was just, that was the main problem really, was the scenarios out of balance. I thought the system, I was like, God, there's something here. It was very frustrating. It seems like a very, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's a good co-op idea, but it just wasn't executing, it wasn't hitting for me. So I just was like, Zombicide, they're just selling minis, the whole thing. And then, so I heard rumblings that, the Black Plague was really good. It's actually interesting, and they had really kind of refined the system. So I picked up the Green Horde, and I was like, whoa, this is really fun. This is really good co-op. And, the scenarios that I've played of it are really cool. And it has the good co-op thing, the good pandemic thing where you've got spawns and things that are just happening. You're kind of like putting out fires and trying to set yourself up in such a way to prevent fires from ever starting, and being real tactical and spatial on the board. It has all that kind of fun stuff going for it. And, it's fun. I got all the minis painted and everything, and it's really cool to set up and play. So, and then I wasn't really super interested in Invader, Zombicide Invader, which is the game that I'm talking about. And I was like, oh, it's in space? Zombicide in space. Okay, because it's just aliens. But then I watched a review of it. I was like, oh, I'm curious about this. And I think somebody had backed the Kickstarter. And I watched it, and I'm like, oh, dang it. This seems like it's probably better than Green Horde mechanically, because it's got some extra little elements and stuff in there. So anyway, that's my last game, Zombicide Invader, because I really have enjoyed Green Horde. I haven't picked up Black Plague yet. I still want to pick up Black Plague, and because you can combine Black Plague with Green Horde. So I want to do that anyway. So I do at least want to go check out Invader and see if it's as fun as I think it's going to be. But I really want to try Invader and stuff. The sci-fi theme to me is sort of like, okay, Zombicide in space. Okay, But after watching that video, I was like, okay, that seems all right. Whatever. It's zombies anyway. Who gives a rat? So yeah. So that one seems really fun. And it seems like, just having played Green Horde several times and watching the video of Invader, I was like, that seems good. Sometimes you can just tell. So that's my top 10 games that are for sale, and I just did the top 10 that will be for demo. I hope to see you guys at Gen Con. I will be floating around. I'll be doing some kind of coverage. It may end up being like Instagram photos, or it might be some video stuff. I've got a system set up to try, and we'll see how it goes. I've done some experimenting in the room, and so I'm excited. Gen Con's fun. It's my favorite convention of the year. And if you don't catch me at the vendor hall, I will be in the BGG Hotness room, and I will be wandering around. And don't be afraid, of course, of just saying hello. and all that fun stuff, and maybe we can get a game in together. Probably not, because whatever. Like, it's busy. But if you're sitting there, I won't be afraid to play a game. If you're playing something I'm interested in, then I'll be happy to play, or at least chat with you for a few minutes. Okay, so have a good week and take care and be safe on your travels. And if you're not going to Gen Con, be safe as well. And we'll see you guys after I get back. So thanks.